Having married Ted, who works for a foreign company, I changed to part-time work at his request. Then, Ted began to look down on me. The day after we moved into our brand new 5-room house. When I returned from work, Ted had invited his mistress and their love child to our home. "Sandra, get out right now," he commanded me. "I'm going to live with my mistress and our child." "Parasite, get out of the house." Alyssa also hurled insults at me with a grin. "Understood." I loaded the moving boxes into the car and left the house. 2 weeks later, I managed to arrange a meeting with Ted and returned home. "Sandra, let's try this trendy to living apart together marriage." Trying to act sophisticated, Ted said that, to which I replied, "What? I'm single, you know?" "What?" In front of their bewildered eyes, I presented the family register. Claire Hansen gasped at the document labeled ex-husband, Ted Morris. Confused, Ted saw me lift my lips. "Now is your only time to act all high and mighty. I'll make you feel the same despair I did. I am Sandra, a 48-year-old housewife. I've been married to Ted, who is 8 years my junior, for 15 years. We met at work. Our parent company teamed up with us to co-develop a new product. Ted wasn't particularly skilled, but he was serious, gentle, and popular among the female staff, I remember. I liked him too, but considering the age difference, I thought it would be bothersome if he had feelings for me, so I was careful not to get too close. So, when Ted proposed a relationship with marriage in mind, I was astonished. "Sandra, you're so reliable, it feels comforting to work with you. I'd love to build a family with someone like you." His eyes sparkling, he said that, and my heart swelled. I knew some male colleagues called me unfeminine and arrogantly competent. So his words meant a lot to me. After a year of dating, we got married. After our engagement, Ted made a suggestion. "I'm not good with kids. So, I'd like to continue just the two of us." Understood. I really wanted children, but being able to marry a man 8 years my junior at 33. I felt fortunate and gave up on the idea. At that time, I had no clue about Ted's hidden side. Both Ted and I worked full-time. We had decent salaries, a so-called power couple. However, Ted naturally left all the household chores to me. It's a common story, but despite deciding to share the chores, Ted easily broke that promise after marriage. He sent a message saying, "I'll be late due to overtime." Rushing home, Ted greeted me with a scowl. "Sorry, I'm late. I'll make dinner right away." "Oh, there's no meatloaf." I prepared the meatloaf in the morning, planning to just bake it later, but now I can't find it. As I rummaged through the fridge, Ted nonchalantly said, "I ate the meatloaf for lunch. See, I took the afternoon off." "What? And the potato soup too? Just make more." "So, how long until it's ready?" I felt defeated. There was no more ground meat or potatoes left. It would take over an hour to go to the nearest supermarket, buy the ingredients, and start from chopping the onions. I need to buy ingredients, so it won't be ready until after 9 p.m. "Didn't you realize they were for dinner?" As I grumbled, Ted rolled his eyes. "Don't get mad just because I snacked on dinner, you're so narrow-minded." I had no choice, there was nothing else for lunch. Instead of complaining, "Why don't you hurry up and go buy them?" Despite it being his fault, what a thing to say. I was also just back from work, tired and hungry. Seeing my face, Ted clicked his tongue and put on his jacket. "Forget it. I'll eat out." He then stretched out his hand in front of me. "What?" "It's your fault, so give me some money." I couldn't believe my ears, but to avoid further argument, I reluctantly took out a $50 bill from my wallet and handed it to Ted. That night, Ted came home late, completely in a good mood. But I was left feeling uneasy after finishing my dinner with just some side dishes and bread. Moreover, even when Ted came home on time, he never bothered to bring in the laundry or take his turn cleaning on weekends. He left all the household tasks to me. When I confronted him, he repeated the same excuses. Housework is women's work, isn't it? I'm tired from work. Even if our salaries are almost the same, my job is harder. I was fed up with fighting about chores when Ted's transfer to another region was decided. I've been appointed leader of a new project. I guess they have high expectations for me. Returning home, he proudly spoke as he changed into his casual clothes. You've been doing more overtime, business trips, and working on holidays recently. But don't overdo it. And try to moderate the after-work drinks with your subordinates. I know. Ted chuckled ruefully. A few days after celebrating his promotion with a homemade meal, Ted spoke to me while I was cleaning up after dinner. Sandra, this is just perfect. Now you can quit your job, can't you? What? To my bewildered reaction, Ted smiled. You're so responsible, I knew you wouldn't quit on your own. Now you can be a full-time housewife. I was at a loss for words. I loved my job and had worked hard since I joined the company as a new graduate. Despite discussing this with Ted before our marriage, I wondered what he had been listening to all this time. We have enough with just my salary, so there's no need for you to work. What, but? See, you've been slacking on the housework lately, right? Women shouldn't be working anyway, just focus on the household. I was speechless. Was he really such an old-fashioned thinker? Although I strongly wished to continue working, I was hesitant to make Ted move alone due to work the year after our marriage. Reluctantly, I quit my job and moved with Ted to the countryside. I hated arguing over housework. But after persistently negotiating because I wanted to work, Ted finally relented. All right, I'll allow you to work part-time. But from now on, I will manage the finances. Ted said with a resigned look. I'll take care of your salary. I'll allocate funds for savings and living expenses. And from what's left, I'll give you some spending money. You know, I often have meals and drinks with my colleagues and subordinates. So I need some disposable income. Yes, that's fine. Over the years, Ted was transferred every few years. His work involved advising regional branches and helping out at busy locations. Since my part-time job was with a nationwide supermarket chain, I was able to continue working at stores near our new locations. Even though it was part-time, I continued the same job for over 10 years, gradually accumulating experience. Even as my work schedule changed and I had more time to manage household tasks properly, Ted continued to find fault. When he was in a bad mood, he'd nag about a tiny speck of dust in the corner of the hallway or a slight stain on the stove. My mother, even when sick with a high fever, managed to do the housework perfectly. Why can't you? He criticized me by comparing me to his stay-at-home mother. The thought of a family forcing a sick person to do housework was terrifying, especially with a domineering father-in-law and a submissive mother-in-law likely being that way. I'm cooking after half a day of physical work. There might be some spots I missed. I pursed my lips. If you're going to complain, why don't you help out? Since we got married, you haven't even washed a single dish. When I finally spoke up, Ted flew into a rage. Huh? You want me, who works at a foreign company, to do housework? I'm way more tired than you. I shrank back at Ted's shouting. You just have an easy part-time job. I, a graduate of a prestigious university, am doing work that supports the country's future. You, with your third-rate university degree, have no right to complain. The university you attended doesn't matter. Shut up. Who do you think allows you to live comfortably in this house? If you have complaints, we can get divorced right now. Waving a divorce paper he somehow obtained, he glared at me. After our argument, Ted isolated himself in his room. He ate his meals there and ignored my attempts to speak to him. He wouldn't even look at me for a while. 2 days later, while I was preparing breakfast, Ted, still in his pajamas, came downstairs to the kitchen and hugged me from behind. I'm sorry about the other day, I went too far. He whispered softly in my ear. I sighed softly. This was always the pattern. After a quarrel, Ted would eventually come to me with a different demeanor. Apologetic and gentle. I rely on you too much because you're older. I lashed out because my boss was mean to me. I'm really sorry. Hearing his remorseful voice made it hard to stay angry. No, it's okay. I'll try to do better with the housework. You're doing enough, Sandra. Thank you for everything. His sweet words made me forgive him again. In the end, I loved Ted. Ted is tired from work. He's really a kind person. Complaining to me is just a sign that he feels comfortable with me. That's how I made excuses for Ted's whims and harsh words, unable to fully resent him. Despite my patience, Ted's verbal abuse worsened over time. Eventually, the apologies ceased, and it became normal for him to get angry over trivial things or to treat me with a sulky demeanor. One day, a definitive event chilled my feelings of love for Ted. Ted got the flu. Since we lived on one floor of a company housing complex, it was difficult to separate our living spaces as if we were in a 2-story house. I moved a blanket to the living room to at least sleep separately. While caring for Ted with offerings of soup and sports drinks, he seemed displeased. You're sleeping in another room while your husband is bedridden with illness? Are you even a wife? He snapped at me with a raspy voice. I'm sorry. But you know, I have work. It would be serious if I caught it too. Feeling guilty, I replied, and Ted's eyes widened with anger. You cold woman. What's more important to you, me or your job? Work is important too. And Ted, you have a slight fever and an appetite, right? My body feels heavy and it's tough. It's a wife's duty to nurse me without a break. Devote yourself more to me. I was internally dismayed, thinking he was acting like a kindergartner. But perhaps he really feels bad when he gets sick since he's usually so healthy. All right. Feeling unable to refuse a sick person's request, I returned the blanket to Ted's side and nursed him through the night. As expected, Ted recovered and I got infected in return. Then, looking down at me, weak with over 100-degree fever, Ted declared, "Don't infect me. I'm going on a trip with my colleagues." Sandra reminded him, "You mentioned that. Could you buy some sports drinks and soup? I used up all we had for you." Ted Morris scowled annoyingly. "You can do that yourself. I can't go out, I'm under quarantine." "Not my problem. You got it because you can't manage yourself. Deal with it yourself." He left for his trip cheerfully, throwing these words behind. As the door closed, I lay in my blanket, tears welling up. Was he always this cold-hearted? He was so kind when we were dating. The pain in my body and the high fever clouded my mind. I was thirsty too, but I had to conserve the last bottle of water by my pillow. I felt my lingering affection for Ted cooling rapidly, somehow managing not to dehydrate. I recovered from the flu and set my long-considered plan into motion. Since our marriage, I had moved with Ted to company housing wherever he was transferred. But I had run out of patience with him. Once he received his next transfer order, I planned to stay put. Currently, Ted had returned to the main office where we were first married. In the neighboring town, I had land that was left to me by my deceased parents. I decided to build a spacious single-family house there, a dream I had long harbored. When I discussed it with Ted, his eyes widened in surprise, then lit up. A new 5-room house, huh? That's cool. Can I do the interior and layout however I like? Oh, of course. Wow, a courtyard with parking for 3 cars. Ted seemed excited as if it was his own project. It had been a while since I saw him smile. I was planning a guest room with a wide veranda, a walk-in closet, and even a home theater room, and it just kept getting bigger. That sounds like a nice house. They would love it too. Huh? No, nothing. He chuckled and shrugged his shoulders. Half a year later, the house was completed, and after various procedures, we moved out of the company housing. I took the day off only on the moving day due to staff shortages at my job. And the next day, I left Ted, who had taken a day off, to unpack while I went to work. When I returned, I saw an unfamiliar pink car in the new driveway. Feeling a bad premonition, I hurried to the front door. Opening it, I found Ted's leather shoes next to yellow sneakers and leopard print pumps scattered around. From the end of the hallway, I could hear Ted's cheerful voice. A young girl's voice still with childish tones, and a young woman's voice. Alyssa, do you like my house? Of course, Daddy. I can brag about this to everyone. You really work at a big company. What about you, Claire? It's more amazing than I imagined. It's like a dream to live in a house like this. Her voice was high-pitched and excited. You always promised we'd live together once you came back here. It was worth waiting and trusting you. I told you I'd call you over. Ted confidently spoke. But, are you sure it's okay to kick your wife out? What if she sues? It could be messy. It's fine. She's head over heels for me. If I hint at divorce, she'll hand over the house in no time. Ted boasted. I married that plain old woman as a favor. I've let her have a good life for long enough. I felt my cheeks flush with heat. Ted thought of me that way. Dad, why did you marry someone 8 years older? You're handsome, you could have anyone. Alyssa curiously asked. It was for the money, obviously. Ted said with a laugh. She had a lot of savings. Always brought her own lunch. So she seemed good at housekeeping. She's not popular, so she'd do anything for a kind word. So she's basically like a maid. But now, she's clinging to Ted's income to survive, huh? Poor thing. Claire laughed crudely. Claire doesn't want marriage. It's easier for me to have affairs. You can't enjoy the thrill of sneaking around if you're married. Makes sense. The 3 of them laughed uproariously. When I appeared, the laughter stopped, but Ted immediately yelled. Sandra, get out right now. He ordered me arrogantly. I'm going to live with my mistress and our love child. I looked at Ted's mean smirk, Claire's triumphant face, and Alyssa in turn. Seeing Claire's face made me feel like my insides were boiling. She was a university student who had worked part-time at Ted's company. There had been rumors, but I believed him when he denied them. It turns out I was betrayed after all. Parasite, get out of the house. Alyssa spread a mocking smile across her face. It took me some time to grasp what was happening. Ah. I see. I was about to have the house I built taken over by my husband, his mistress, and their love child. I didn't care about anything anymore. I couldn't muster the energy to argue and muttered weakly. Understood. I stepped outside, opened the back door of the car, and loaded it with moving boxes. I'll come back for the rest of my things later. With that, I left the house. Driving aimlessly, tears streamed down my cheeks. Realizing I couldn't drive properly in this state, I pulled over to the shoulder of a main road. Burying my face in my hands as I hugged the steering wheel, tears flowed freely. My heart felt like it was being torn apart by frustration and misery. Though my feelings had faded, I had believed I married him because I loved him. There were signs of infidelity, but I never imagined that right after our marriage. He was already involved with someone and even had a hidden child. After sobbing for a while, I was overcome with a storm-like rage. Any lingering affection had now completely disappeared. Clenching my back teeth and trembling with anger, I vowed, "Ted, prepare yourself. You've trampled over my feelings. Enjoy your time now while you can." After securing a lease at a temporary apartment, I moved my boxes there and then sent Ted a message. "I want to discuss our future. I'll bring the divorce papers then." Ted quickly replied, "I have no intention of divorcing. It would affect my career. Besides, you'd want to boast about having a husband who works at a large corporation. Wouldn't you?" "Oh, you don't have any friends, do you?" Angered, I replied, "I didn't marry you for your job title." "Huh. I don't care, but no divorce. I just want to live in that house with Claire and Alyssa." After creating a mistress and a hidden child, how shameless could he be? It seemed the only option was to hire a lawyer skilled in divorce cases and take this to negotiations. Thinking of getting advice from a former colleague, Jennifer, who had experienced divorce, I arranged to meet her after work. The next day, while waiting in a cafe near my office, Jennifer appeared. I apologized as soon as she arrived. "Sorry for bothering you when you're busy. I just needed to talk in person." "No problem. I wanted to see you too. Have you been okay?" I hesitated, and Jennifer's expression darkened. "Is it something about Ted?" "Actually." After I explained everything, Jennifer was visibly angry. "That guy looks nice, but he's a good-for-nothing. I trusted him because he seemed decent at his job and had a nice demeanor." Then, Jennifer realized something. "Wait, Claire Hansen? Wasn't she the girl from the rumors? She was an intern at 20, right?" He denied anything was going on with her back then. I lowered my voice. "That's right. It was the year after we got married. Ted had an affair with her and even fathered a child, and they've been involved ever since. I can't believe it. What a lowlife." Jennifer's face turned red with rage. "Now you should get a hefty compensation and make him regret what he's done to you." "No, that's too mild, isn't it? Regardless, he must deeply regret betraying you. You often hear about men buying apartments for their mistresses. But inviting them to live in the house and kicking out his wife is insane. And yet he doesn't want a divorce, it's too selfish." Jennifer nodded in agreement. "He's turning 40 this year, right? Is he a section chief now? He could be a department head in a few years. Just imagining a man who wrecked his family, now commanding subordinates and acting arrogant at work, made me nauseous." "Sandra, you're not just going to watch, are you?" I shook my head. "Absolutely not. I won't just cry myself to sleep after being treated like this. First, we'll need a background check." Looking me in the eye, Jennifer offered, "I'll refer you to the private investigator I used. They're pricey but reliable. The lawyer I hired is great for infidelity cases, too." "Yes, please. I've been looking but nothing seemed right." As I finished my coffee, Jennifer reassured me. "I'm here anytime you need to talk. Don't hesitate to reach out." "Understood. Thank you." Grateful, I decided to call the recommended private investigator right away. A month later, once I had the results of the investigation, I contacted Ted again and told him I'd be coming to the house. Arriving around noon, I was greeted at the entrance by Claire and Alyssa as if nothing was amiss. Entering the living room, I saw a tacky gold-plated shelf that clashed with the Scandinavian decor and a cheap-looking sofa set that took up too much space. Claire addressed me in a contrived tone. "It's the first time we have you over, Mrs. Morris." Alyssa baked cookies as a welcome gesture. "Please, have some." "Cookies? Could they be poisoned?" Watching Claire and Alyssa smirk, I couldn't help but suspect it. "Surely, you wouldn't be so mean as to refuse cookies made by a child, would you?" "Of course not." "I'll have some." Reluctantly, I took a seat on the sofa I was shown to. Ted was eagerly watching Claire and Alyssa as they entertained me. As I felt dismayed by the drastic changes made to the interior I designed. Coffee and cookies were served. "Here you go, Parasi. I mean, Dad's wife." "Thank you. I'll have some." I forced a smile and picked up a cookie to eat. As I tried to bite into it, it was so hard I thought my jaw might dislocate. "Sandra, Alyssa's cookies are crunchy like hard candy, right?" "Delicious, aren't they?" With a dopey smile, Ted spoke to me. "She dreams of being a pastry chef. She's got a bright future ahead." "Dad, you're embarrassing me." "Stop it." From the outside, it looked like a sweet father-daughter interaction. But it made me incredibly angry. Despite claiming to dislike children and refusing to have a family life with me, he had gone ahead and fathered a daughter with his mistress. What was I to him all this time? The thought was unbearable. "So, what brings you here today?" "I came here to discuss our divorce, obviously." As I responded sharply, Claire twisted around. "Please don't misunderstand, Mrs. Morris. I have no intention of marrying Ted." She leaned against Ted and cooed in a sugary voice. "Divorce would affect his career advancement, right? I wouldn't want to trouble the man I love." Claire really gets me. Ted then smiled warmly at her. "So, Sandra, how about we try this modern trend of living apart? It might be tough living alone on your meager salary, but, well, you'll manage. Right, Mrs. Morris? You're like a parasite. Without Dad's money, you'd be lost. But Dad loves only our mom and me, so it can't be helped." At Alyssa's words, Claire grinned. "It's your fault for being disposable. Better luck next time." The three of them laughed heartily as I coolly informed them. "What? I'm single, though." "What?" In front of a bewildered Ted, Claire, and Alyssa, I presented the family register. The document listed ex-husband, Ted Morris, made the three gasp. "Hey, what's this all about?" "You handed this to me, Ted." "And how thoughtful, it was already signed," I said in a cold voice. "Remember, during our last fight, you threatened me. If I couldn't obey you, you said you'd divorce me, right?" "Huh? Did I say that?" Ted's face twitched. "When I was moving, I found it in the chest in the bedroom. So, I submitted it to the office." As Ted's face grew redder, he began to shout. "You can't just do whatever you want. What if I can't get promoted because of this?" "Exactly. It's your responsibility to fix this." "Oh, still just a regular employee, yet pretending so much." I chuckled, causing Ted to freeze. "What?" With lips pursed and trembling, Ted was stared down by Claire and Alyssa. "A friend of a friend works at Ted's office. I had them dig up some info." I spoke with a smile, causing Claire to panic. Ted is a division manager at a multinational corporation's U.S. branch, right? He earns over $100,000 a year and is often called around the country as an advisor. Because he's so smart and graduated from a prestigious university. The two tilted their heads, puzzled, as I burst out laughing. A division manager? He's just a section chief. Plus, after getting the position, he kept making mistakes. And was frequently sent away to regional offices. Good at his job? That's a lie. Claire's face stiffened, but she quickly plastered on a smile and hugged Ted from behind. Oh Ted, you're so modest. You think I'd leave you over something like that? There, Ted. You have a kind mistress. Maybe it's time to come clean? I cheerfully suggested as Ted kept his eyes fixed on the table, staying silent. If you won't tell, I'll expose it for you. I took out photos and investigation reports from my bag, laying them out on the table. Claire and Alyssa leaned in to look. Claire's face changed color instantly. Who are these women and children with Ted? That girl looks a lot like me. At those words, Claire's eyes widened. Could it be? Exactly. Ted's mistresses and hidden children. Claire and Alyssa were left speechless, their mouths agape. 1. I pointed at Claire and then counted the photos in front of me. 2, 3, 4, 5. What's that? The ranking of the mistresses. With a sympathetic smile at Claire, who looked shocked, I continued. You're in luck, Claire. It seems you're number 1, both in the order you were made and in priority. Claire was speechless, so I kindly elaborated. You see, every time Ted made a mistake at work and got transferred, he'd frequent nightclubs and father children with mistresses across the regions. Although he told his mistresses he was married, he kept it a secret that he had other affairs. Glancing at a downcast Ted, I continued. Even when transferred elsewhere, he'd meet them under the guise of business trips or vacations and give them money for living expenses. It's practically polygamy. Quite luxurious, like a noble from ancient times. In front of an impressed me, Claire clenched her fists. Alyssa was on the verge of tears. Dad, you're joking, right? You said you loved Mom and me. Say something. But we're the most important to you, right? She wrapped her arms around Ted's back, looking up at him with pleading eyes. You take us to fancy restaurants and regularly give us gifts. He even invited us to his house.
Yeah.
That's right. Giving us a house, that's the best treatment. We are special. As Claire and Alyssa tried to convince themselves with rapid chatter, I interjected. He has no intention of gifting you this house. Suddenly, the two turned on me. That's none of your business. Exactly. Parasites should just keep quiet. I'm just kindly letting you know early. With a slight smirk, I delivered the news. The house will be put up for sale next weekend, so you'll need to move out by then. What? Such a waste. It was built with my savings, after all. But I don't want to live in a house that's been inhabited by mistresses and hidden children. After a moment of stunned silence, Claire and Alyssa screamed. What are you talking about? This is Dad's house, right? No, it's not. It's built on land I inherited from my parents, and I own the house. After the divorce, I plan to live here alone. Claire and Alyssa gaped, speechless, as I continued. Yet, here you are, having kicked out the owner to move in mistresses and hidden children. What were you thinking? You could buy the house because of me. Ted finally spoke up after remaining silent for a while. He glared at me with fierce eyes and raised his voice. It's because I worked and let you save that you had the money. I earned well because I'm an elite, which gave you such comforts. Even though you're incompetent. Ted was shaking with anger, spitting as he yelled. You're ungrateful. You've forgotten the favor I did by marrying you. Who do you think you are? Yes, whatever. As I brushed off his comments, Alyssa seemed to realize something. Dad, you're just a regular employee now, right? And yet, you're looking after not just us, but other mistresses too. You must be very wealthy. Well, he works at a big company, so he must be earning a good salary. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I spread out Ted's credit card statements on the table, causing Claire to freeze in shock. Alyssa, peering over, screamed. $20,000 in debt? Are you kidding? It's addressed to me. Don't open my mail without permission. It was an accident. As Ted clicked his tongue in response to Claire and Alyssa's reactions, Sandra laid it all out. Surprise, surprise. Along with the revolving credit, there are shady loans too. Totaling about $50,000, right? I laughed mockingly. This is what happens when someone on a lower salary than mine tries to show off. By splurging on mistresses and hidden children. That's a lie. He stood up abruptly and berated me. There's no way a part-time clerk like you earns more than me. I thought you'd say that. I thrust her pay slip under Ted's nose, causing him to stagger back and collapse onto the sofa, his face aghast. He holds his head and mutters in a voice that seems to disappear. Sandra earning more than me. That must be a mistake. I chuckled through her nose. A few years ago, I passed a test and became a full-time employee. Thanks to my track record, I'm now the manager of this regional branch. The blood drains from Ted's face. That's why I earn $10,000 more annually than you, Ted. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to save enough to build this house. Why didn't you tell me? Keeping secrets from your husband, that's deceitful. The man who's been creating mistresses and hidden children all over America is asking that? I shut down the shaken Ted with my firm response. Just so you know, despite your low salary and debt, I will be claiming compensation from you. It's going to be a substantial amount given the length of time involved. Be prepared. What? I'm already barely making it. There's no way I can handle more. Hey, what's going on with you two? He tried to stop Claire and Alyssa as they grabbed their bags and coats, attempting to leave the room. I can't deal with this anymore. I'm leaving. Where to? This is your home, isn't it? It's not Dad's house, it's her house. Alyssa smiled sarcastically. We used to call her a parasite, but it turns out Dad is the real parasite. I don't need a lying, debt-ridden father. Claire expressed her disgust in a weary tone. I thought it was okay to be a mistress as long as he spoiled me. But a futureless, debt-ridden old man is just a waste of time. Old man? I'll find someone better.
Bye.
Don't contact me again. As Claire and Alyssa briskly walked out, Ted Morris collapsed to his knees at the door. Claire, Alyssa, please come back. Ignoring Ted's tears, I continued to pack her things when Ted suddenly made an offer in a soft tone. Hey, let's get remarried. What? I'll forgive you for submitting the divorce papers without my permission. Let's start over. After all, you matter the most to me. Astonished, I showed Ted my phone. It's too late. I had Jennifer's friend live stream this to your boss. Ted's face turned pale. Your past mistakes were overlooked with transfers. But this time you're probably getting fired. Ted collapsed, making a pitiful sound. Without looking back, I left the house. Ted, having given up on rebuilding with me, apparently continued to contact Claire and Alyssa persistently. However, Claire blocked all contact with Ted after moving her belongings from my house to a new apartment. The next day, Ted was fired. During lunch, his subordinates showed him being humiliated on their phones. And his boss, who valued family, was furious. Informed by the real estate agent that the house would be sold, Ted moved into a shabby apartment, crying. When I threatened to sue if he spoke further about reconciliation, Ted finally gave up. After hiring a lawyer to claim compensation from Claire and Ted, both readily agreed. Claire, now burdened with debt repayment, increased her shifts at the bar and took a daytime job. Her once glamorous appearance faded with her non-stop work schedule. Ted, too, was juggling multiple part-time jobs to manage his growing debt. With no time or money, his nights at the nightclubs were over. With the money from the house sale and the compensation, I moved into a high-rise luxury apartment. Though it was sad to let go of the meticulously designed house, my new, simple, and functional apartment suited me well. I enjoyed the nighttime view from my large windows. Now free from being forced to do all the housework, I switched to full-time work. From now on, I plan to fully enjoy my life, indulging in movies and travel, making up for the times I had restrained myself.